When I was in the 4th or 5th grade, my great-grandma died. I have nothing but fond memories of her, but I heard horrible stories about her and how mean she was from everyone else in the family. People always say that I was her favorite, and she treated me more kindly than anyone else in her entire life. But the night she died, I woke up and my bed was hovering in the air, almost halfway to the ceiling. When I sat up in the bed, it dropped straight to the ground. I think it was her coming to say goodbye to me, since apparently I was the only one in the family that she liked. In the same house, one day I was sitting alone in the living room on the recliner watching TV. I was wide awake watching one of the 3 channels we got while on summer vacation, so it was probably some game show or something. I felt someone grip the top of the armchair directly above my head. I could feel it get close to me. You know that feeling when someone's face is right next to your face? And then I felt breath on my ear, and it said, "Why are you here?" This is far from my scariest experiences, but this one gives me the most chills. These are the only encounters that I can recall while living in that house. My high school was rumored to be haunted, and there were 2 teachers who would openly talk about their experiences. Both were little kids, one being a small girl asking help finding her doll. When a teacher was at school after hours alone, the teacher went into the bathroom that the girl pointed to where the doll was, and when the teacher came back empty-handed, the girl was gone. The other was a gym teacher who saw a boy in camouflage clothes run right in front of him and disappear. Now, me being young and adventurous, I decided to check this out for myself, which I fully regretted later. It was late on a Saturday night, and we were coming home from a wrestling meet. Our coach passed around his cell phone for us to use to call our parents and have them meet us at the school to pick us up when we arrived. This was before everyone had cell phones. I didn't call my mom on purpose, even though the coach said that he had dinner plans and had to get going immediately. We get to the school and everyone left except the coach and me. I told him I'm not sure what was holding my mom up, but to go ahead and go, and I would lock up. Actually, I can't believe he fell for it, but he did, and I had the whole school to myself. I immediately checked out the gym where the sightings had apparently been, and nothing was out of the ordinary there. I then went into the coach's office because I had never seen it. The coach's office was in the center of 3 connected locker rooms. You could only access the office by going through one of the locker rooms, as they all led there. I remember calling my friends from the office phone bragging about how I was the only one in the school, and this is when things started picking up. As I sat there on the coach's couch, the radio turned on all by itself, and while it was playing, I could hear people running in one of the locker rooms. It had had an incline ramp in it, and I could hear footsteps sprinting down the ramp, and there was an old pipe that hung from the ceiling the kids used to hang hangers from when they graduated. It was kind of a tradition, and I could hear hundreds of coat hangers being hit by something while they were running underneath it. I had had enough, and I called my mom to come pick me up. I told her it was kind of an emergency, and she said she would be there in 15 minutes. I hung up with her, turned off the radio, and sat petrified, hoping she would be quick. Then from another door in the coach's office, I heard it creak open. The door was just out of sight, but only 10 feet from me, and then it slammed shut. It was a slam that could only be produced from someone trying to make the door hit as loudly as possible. And that was it for me. I ran out the door, the furthest from the one that slammed, and it happened to be the one that I just heard the footsteps in. I didn't care. I ran. As I got out of the locker room, I was in the gymnasium, and all the doors were rattling. The outside doors were slapping like someone was trying to get out or in, and the auxiliary basketball goals, the ones that could be pulled up and down for younger kids to play with, were swinging. Not long swings, but 6 inches or so back and forth. I ran out the closest door and into the school's foyer. The lights in here and in the hallway were flashing without any particular rhythm. I ran through them, only seeing brief flashes of light between flashes. I turned 90 degrees down a different hallway and toward the door that I was supposed to exit from to lock. This hallway was pitch black except the dust of dawn lights outside in the parking lot streaming through the door. Halfway down the hallway, there was the opposite door for the locker room that had just been slammed. This was the door that the students entered to get into the locker room. As I ran past it, the door opened and something screamed at me. It sounded almost like a painful moan, but it was as loud as a scream I had ever heard. This sent me into hyperdrive and I ran faster. I remember I got outside and walked around the front of the school and turned around and yelled at the building, "You win, I'm leaving." Then all the lights started flashing again. By the time my mom found me, I was 1.5 miles down the road walking towards home. I lived in a house in Fort Worth back in 2001 with my family. We had moved in about 5 or 6 weeks prior before anything happened. The first incident I remember happened to my sister. She was in her room doing homework when she heard a whisper say, "Hey, you." I can remember her screaming as she ran out of her room. That same night, we had a small TV in the kitchen sitting on the counter. Everyone was in bed when my dad said he woke up and heard a TV on. He walked into the kitchen and found the small TV, and it was playing. Since he was the last one in bed that night, he knew that TV was not on when he went to bed. But he leaned across the counter and shut it off and walked towards the hallway when suddenly the TV hit the ground and smashed. That TV landed only a foot from him. It was literally thrown at him. That woke my mom up and she went running into the kitchen, but as she turned the corner, she saw a dark figure standing right behind my dad. She hollered at my dad, "Someone is behind you." And when Dad spun around, there was no one there. My mother later would tell us about this happening and said the figure was just gone, instantly. Another incident happened a few weeks later to my uncle, who had come by to install a new water heater in the basement. He and his son, my cousin, had the new one in and was hooking the lines up to it when my cousin felt someone tap him on top of his head. At first he thought it was his dad, but when he turned, my uncle was over by the workbench with his back to him. He said, "Dad, something just tapped me on my head." And before my uncle could respond, they both heard a voice saying, "Jerry," which was my uncle's name. Needless to say, they finished and left. Later, my uncle would call my dad and tell him what happened. Another incident that happened to my sister while she was in the shower. The bathroom door opened and slammed so hard that it shook that whole end of the house. My mom, who was in the living room, ran down the hall, and my sister was screaming in the bathroom. The door had slammed so hard that it busted the door jamb. It took my mom several hard tugs to get that door open. My sister said something was in the shower with her and had groped her. Another incident happened to me when I was in my room talking on the phone with one of my friends. I had a couple of baseball bats in the corner of my room by my closet. They fell over on the floor and I got up to stand them back up. When I leaned over to pick them up, something grabbed me by the back of my neck and tried to shove me down on the floor. I twirled around swinging my fist, but nothing was there. My friend, who was still on the phone, said he heard someone laughing. We lived in this house from the time I was 13, and my sister, who was 2 years older, until we went to college, and then my parents sold it. There were so many things that happened in that house, but it would make this email too long. I'll definitely send you more as I get time to write more of them down. Thank you, Chris. I work for UPS in Pennsylvania and have heard and seen some strange things while dropping packages off at houses. The scariest account I have had was a delivery to a house that I have been to in the past. There is an elderly lady that lives there, and she is probably in her late 70s. Whenever I stop there, she always greets me at the door, and this time was no different. As I walk to the door, she opens it, and as I'm having her sign for the package, a little red-headed girl about 5 years old peeks around her. As I'm just about to ask if that is her granddaughter, the girl vanishes right in front of me. That scared the hell out of me, and I jumped back a little. The lady asked, "Are you okay?" And I said yes, and I turned and started to walk back to my truck, and I was really shook up. Despite my fear, I had to go back and say something. So I knocked on the door again, and she opened the door, and I said, "I'm sorry, and this is going to sound crazy, but I saw something when I was at the door." I said there was a little girl standing behind you peeking out at me, and then she just vanished. The lady didn't seem surprised and asked what did she look like. I said she was a little red-headed girl and was wearing a yellow dress. The lady smiled and said, "That is my daughter," and that she had passed away when she was 6. She said that she sees her